There's Mr.
Ah.
Poulin.
There we go. There we go.
We got it.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. This is my first visit to StreamYard, so a little bit different getting in, but all good.
You figured it out. It took me about.
Well, credit the pandemic for that, gang, because, you know, in my world, and I live in about 7 or 8 different verticals for media, and some of this home studio stuff, I can have as many as 6 devices open to broadcast from home. It's crazy.
Wow.
Like, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So, yeah, if you don't navigate, you have, and I'm not a techie at all, but I've had no choice through this pandemic to figure it out. So it's been good.
Yeah, we kind of had to, right? Same with me. I'm so old school. I don't know how to, but I'm figuring it out slowly but surely. Corey's good at it all. But
I was gonna say you look good and you sound good right now. So
well, thank you. Well, thank you. We'll take both those.
Yeah.
And so have you ever met Corey?
I have not. I have
Nope.
not. This is a pleasure.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Dave.
Are you based out of Philly as well, Corey?
I'm not. I'm in St. Catharines, Ontario.
Oh,
so
nice. Okay.
I'm just right around the lake from Toronto.
Down the road.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, I'm. That's where Kim and I'm force fed the Leafs here, and but I still yeah I know.
Are you up there too now, Dave?
Yeah, just west end of Toronto.
Okay.
So all of the people from our area of the metropole are moving to Corey's area. Like, yeah, that's just happening. Everybody seems to be getting out of the cities, and St. Catharines and that whole Niagara on the lake is just blowing up right now.
Wow.
So he was ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Well, I wish, like I said, the real estate down here is gone through the roof, and yeah, everyone from Toronto's coming in and buying up in Niagara on the Lake and St. Catharines. Problem is, people are selling houses here and they don't have anything to buy.
That's exactly right. Where do you go?
Yeah, no, exactly. And with the prices, you know, people are selling because, you know, $300,000 homes are $1 million right now.
It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, a lot has changed in the past year.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It did give everyone kind of a chance to sit back and get kind of familiar with the technical side. And like I said, I was at Bruce Boudreau's a couple months ago down in Hershey, and yeah, he does all his stuff right from the house. There's a living room. There's another room. He does the caps intermissions, and yeah, it's all right from the home. So
yeah, it's a little scary when you're setting up the tech side of it, and you know you're going live into Sports Center, which is a national show. And
thank God we pre-record, so we don't have to worry about that.
There you go. We were all set. We're off to a smooth start here.
Yeah.
Have you had issues logging on when you had to go live, or have you been?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we'll go with a 4-person panel from 4 different homes. And then the producer and director is at his home. There's 1 person in the studio. But the amazing thing is the video editors are at their homes. Yeah. So I'm literally getting highlights on a return iPad.
Wow.
It's phenomenal that it works. It is. And so there's a separate phone that is a sound app. There's a camera, which is a DeGiro camera. Then there's an iPad, which is return. Like, it's the fact that more things don't go wrong is staggering.
Do you have someone with you to monitor some of that stuff, or is it just you?
No. And then they couldn't come in at the start because of COVID, so they couldn't even come in your house. So they sent you all this stuff, and you know you're unpacking it and you're looking at it like,
what now?
Yeah. And then you have to factor in, depending on the time of day. Okay, the light comes in the house at a certain time of day, and the sun changes, so you've got to have an awning outside. Like, it's
so true. Like, thank God. I mean, my dad doesn't have to do all that, but just for stuff that he had to do, if he didn't have his wife there to do it, he would have no clue how to do it. Like, imagine if this happened back in like the 70s, everyone would be shut off. Like, we didn't have all this technology.
Yeah.
Like,
you'd be reading the paper the next day, Kim.
Yeah, exactly. And Corey, you have everything recording, right?
Yeah, everything's recording.
Okay.
Like, we pre-record, so if you say something we want to cut out, we can always edit. So
yeah, we kind of start right off the bat.
Yeah.
But yeah, we really appreciate you coming on. It's great to see you, and this has been a lot of fun. So we're looking forward to talking to you today.
Great. Now, how long have you guys been doing this?
Oh, what, 30?
14 episodes. Yeah, I kind of go by the
Nice.
episodes. About 14 episodes. So.
Yeah.
Nice.
We just
very
wanted
good.
to talk about the pandemic. That's why we even started this, because we were just talking about different stories growing up in the NHL, and with his dad and my dad, and just how our dads played together for so long, and we just had all these stories, and we're like, we should do a podcast. It was just really on a whim, and neither of us knew what we were doing. We just kind of threw everything together, and it's been so fun. Like, we've really had a really good time with it. So
that's great. That's great. It's been fun.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of different things over the last 18 months in all different worlds, re-entering my old world, and I've got all these different stages of my life in various places, wherever they were. And a lot of those have re-entered during this time. And it's kind of funny because you'll be revisiting something. You're like, well, okay, well, I haven't thought about that in 30 years, or I haven't thought about that in 20 years. So it's been fun.
Were you quarantined up? Like, were your kids near you? You have 3 girls, right?
So I have 3 daughters. One is in Philly, and she has my first grandchild. And we have not seen my granddaughter yet.
Oh, that's the hardest part.
I know. So we're on our way down in a couple of weeks. I'm going to participate in the Flyers alumni camp, fantasy camp, in a couple of weeks. And so I'm really looking forward to getting back and obviously seeing my daughter and son-in-law. But I can't wait to wrap my arms around my granddaughter. So
how old is she?
Be really fun. She's a year.
Oh,
I know, but you just haven't been able to cross the border, right? Now, there's all kinds of technical parts to it, and you could cross at one point, but you needed a 2-week quarantine coming back to Canada. And I actually was probably in a rare mode because of the different things I do at TSN. I worked almost right through the pandemic, including traveling. And so, I went to both Montreal and Ottawa to do games in empty buildings. And so I was working right through, so I couldn't quarantine for 14 days coming back. And so, that's the miss. And then I've got 2 daughters as well in Chicago. So it'll be both of those cities in the next 6 or so weeks as we get this. There's a lot of hugs coming up.
Yeah. My oldest, lived in Chicago for 2 years. Great city.
Terrific city. Yeah, I lived there actually between Notre Dame and my coming back into the NHL with the Leafs. I lived in Chicago, right downtown, and just a great city, and looking forward to revisiting it probably in early September.
I'm so happy to have her back in Philly, obviously, but boy, did I love visiting Chicago. I had never been there until she moved there, and she lived right where you could walk everywhere. She didn't need a car, and just great people.
But that's almost anywhere in the city, Kim. I mean, that their public transit is so good that they don't need cars there. And that's part of the beauty of that town. It really was a well thought out town. And I lived there. Yeah, I lived there previous to coming back here. So I've spent a lot of time there over the years. So one of my favorite cities.
Well, it's funny, I'm vegan, and you would think in Philly, East Coast, there would be a lot more options, but Chicago is like so ahead of the curve with that. Like, so many
it's a foodie town for sure. It's a foodie town.
Yeah. Okay. I'll let you go on and on about that, so I better stop.
It's a small world, though. I was just going to say, Kim's daughter just moved back from Chicago.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Did you get dual citizenship? Playing in the U.S. that long? Oh, okay.
I did. So I have both passports, and that's made life easier for sure.
Yeah, that's what I found, because I'm a dual citizen, and I'm right on the border in St. Catharines of Niagara Falls, New York, and Buffalo. But I did find that loophole where I could drive across by land to the Buffalo airport, and you're free to go like anywhere in the U.S. So it was just flying out of Toronto was it was difficult because I had players from Fort Erie that lived 20 minutes from the Buffalo airport that had to drive to Toronto and fly to Buffalo or fly to Hershey. And then I'd pick them up in the States there and we'd get them to their hockey camps. Right. So,
even in various, like right now, as we plan this trip, it's still to this day. I mean, the rules seem to change again last week. I mean, no one really knows what they are.
Yeah.
And up here, it's been more restrictive. I mean, we're just opening up now, which is crazy. And you know that, Corey, but it's just,
Yeah.
it's been crazy on how long things are restricted. And although we just, I think officially today, Canada checked off the world box for the highest vaccinated country in the world.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
surprising. That's awesome.
hopefully we're going in the right direction there.
Yeah.
Well, my dad didn't go down to the alumni golf tournament because of that 14-day quarantine, right? They can get down, but when you come back, you have to sit inside and quarantine for 14 days. So
Exactly. So that's been lifted. If you're double vaxxed, and you can, I can drive back and forth across the border. So those are the plans for the upcoming trip. Looking forward to seeing the guys again. I've always enjoyed getting back. And the 50th anniversary, which was in 2017, was a really fun year because, I've been gone from Philly since 1990. And
wow, really?
I know. It's crazy to think that. And so, and I've gotten back over years, and one of my daughters has lived there now for, I'd say, 7 years. So I do get back. But during that year, it was really fun because people assume we know each other because we played for the Flyers. But, now I did see Bernie a lot more over the years, but I didn't see your dad, Corey, as much over the years. You'd run into him from time to time. If on occasion they had both age groups back, but it was a couple of golf tournaments that I saw him at and met him. And it's just funny. You have this bond of being a Flyer, and it's a crazy bond because you would think it would be the same with other teams, and some are better than others. But even going through, press boxes over the years, when I was working in the industry, and you'd cross other Flyers in press boxes, and you'd be standing chatting, and somebody'd walk by and say, "Oh yeah, the old Flyers again." Oh, here we go, it's the old Flyers again. But it was almost an envious bond, and it was something that other teams strive for, and teams that do have it. The original six, obviously, they have years and years of history, but of all of the teams after the original six, Philadelphia was able to create something different. And it was almost like a nouveau riche, but they got to be more established. And maybe it was those first two cups, but more arguably it was the character of the people involved in those first two cups. And the great personalities that were so diverse and so unique and really carried that legacy. And quite frankly, we carried the burden of it with the next team. I was on 82, 83 through 90 and good teams, and we went to the finals a couple of times, but we did always carry that burden. We got the benefit of it and also carried the burden of
trying to live up, like people wanted to live up to that.
Yeah, we wanted to live up to it ourselves.
Right.
And with the number of guys that had resided in the area, Kim, that, the bulk of those teams, most of the guys were still there.
Yeah.
And, over those years and had chosen to stay there afterwards. And it was, I mean, big skates to fill, obviously, but also you knew the advantage of being a Flyer. And it's hard to explain, but particularly coming into the Spectrum, years later, I would talk to guys, and I remember having this great chat with Stevie Larmer, the great goal scorer from Chicago and New York. And he talked about his first time with the Chicago Blackhawks going into Philadelphia. And it was, I guess it was probably mid-'80s. And he said the bus pulled up and he got up to get off and no one else was moving. And he was thinking, okay, is anyone coming in with me here? Like,
And they're like, no.
Yeah, we're not sure yet. We're going to see what's happening. But, and we knew that and we sensed it. And we had obviously very good hockey teams as well. But we knew the benefit of we had. And the one common strand, and I tell people that don't understand this all the time, the one commonality was Mr. Schneider.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say,
how rare for an owner to be there for the length of time he was there. And that was,
and be family with everybody, not just running the show. Yeah.
Very much so. Very much so. It was so unique. And, I could still remember, the flavor of it. So my twins were born in 86, in the fall of 86, and they had some real medical challenges. And we weren't able to bring them home for a few months. They were born really preemie, and it was the support you got from the family and from the team. And, and so it came to that year at the All-Star break, and instead of having an All-Star game, they had chosen one team from the NHL, any nationality, and we would play the Russian Red Army team twice during the Quebec Winter Carnival. It was called Rendezvous. And I very, very unexpectedly made that team. And so we had planned to have the christening for the twins during that week off. And so you made all these plans, and there were people coming in from all over North America, and they were going to see the twins for the first time. And it was a really big deal. And then all of a sudden I make this team.
Wow.
And now there's a panic there, right? It's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And Mr. Snyder stepped right in, and he said, well, here's what we're going to do. You're going to go ahead with the christening, which was the first weekend. It was Saturday and Sunday. And he said, everybody's going to come, and then I'm going to give you my private plane to fly up to Quebec on Monday afternoon. But he said, but the only thing is, I haven't gotten my invitation to the christening yet. And so we sort of laughed, and he said, oh no, I'm serious. I want my invitation to the christening. And so, I can still remember on that Sunday afternoon in a packed house full of people, sort of a buzz, and Mr. Snyder's car pulled up in front of the house, and, and he and Martha got out and came in and just totally partook like everybody else. So then I fly up on a private plane, and there were a couple of others involved. Tim Kerr was involved, Hexie and Mark Howe. So they waited and came up with me on the plane. Well, then the big deal's up there. The Gretzkys and Lemieux find out that the Flyers had flown in on a private plane when they flew commercially. Yeah, so it started, But it was Mr. Snyder's expression of, we can do whatever we have to do, and we're going to support you, and how important family is. And by the way, I'm part of your family.
Yeah. Such an amazing human being.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Special. And I've always wondered if it was like that in other cities. And doing this, because we spent my dad's whole career since I was born has been in Philly, retired here, lived here. So I was always curious what it was like with other cities and teams. And, finding out, like you're saying, it's just there's something unique here and something special. Even Corey's dad didn't play here that long, and it was long time. He's still just a Flyer, and exactly. I just think that's really cool, and it all goes back to Mr. Snyder.
Yeah, and another guy, when you were mentioning that, working down from Ed Snyder, was a guy who always comes up on the show. Is Joe Cadillac, who I remember him from. He just took me into dressing rooms. He gave me tours of the Wachovia Center. Just a classy guy, and his name always comes up, but it's just part of that family, right? So
omnipresent.
He's amazing.
Joe is everywhere. Like, how many pictures have you seen where you say, oh, there's a picture of my dad. Oh, there's Joe. It's like, it's like, was he a part of
I get random emails. I get random emails from Joe with pictures, like a picture of me and Jody Clark from like some random thing, or like, I'll just hope you enjoy, Kim. He's just such a cool guy. He really is.
He is. But that's a part of it too, and I think it's a challenge right now for the organization. And I thought that as I sat at Mr. Snyder's funeral, and I, looking around and seeing the people that were there, and I thought, now the real challenge starts, because Mr. Snyder wasn't there the whole way through. I mean, he came and went, and, he had his own life going on and lived on the West Coast for a time, but he was always there. He wasn't there, but he was there. And then to see, the people that came to the funeral, but then also to sit, and I remember clearly sitting and they had it in the hockey rink and the final viewing, and thinking, how do they continue this? How is that possible to continue? And I think it's a real challenge. I think they're going through it right now as an organization to find that, because it not only was a connection amongst the players, it was a connection to the identity of the city. And, it really was. I mean, it was, they were the Broad Street Bullies, and they were a connection to the city, and something that, and the role that Bobby Clark played in that from the day he stepped on the ice, but all the different characters that were involved in that. I know Joe Watson has just recently retired, believe it or not. And, he's all the way through every name that you mention. If you think of, and you talk about your dad, Corey, and, I grew up in Toronto. I think of him as a Flyer.
I love that. That's really cool.
You just do. You think about him as a Flyer.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. Like doing this, the fans, I mean, obviously my dad, he's been in the city, everybody's, but the stories that people are coming up about Corey's dad and how he was their favorite goalie and this and all these cool stories coming up about his dad has been a lot of fun because of doing this. You don't realize just people still think of him as just, alongside with my dad there.
Yeah, there's even confusion, Corey, about his exact time frame because he wasn't traded for your dad. I'm correct about that. Your dads weren't traded for each other, but they switched the exact. But they don't list the trade. It's kind of strange.
Well, I think because Bernie was owned by the Blazers.
Right.
He was with the Blazers, so he was already in Philly. I know, and this is what I keep trying to put it together because Tim and I met each other 4 years ago, but our dads had this whole connection.
Right.
So their rights were traded. So when my dad physically went to Toronto, the rights to Bernie came to Philadelphia, I think.
Right, but it wasn't a physical trade, so they can't list it and I go to my hockey sources in a hockey reference or hockey DP. They're not listed as an official trade.
See, I didn't know that.
It was the rights from the WHA to the NHL, and then the player went in Doug from Philadelphia to Toronto, but not in a trade, almost a transfer. It was kind of strange how it's listed.
Yeah, I never knew that.
Well, and I found it interesting because my dad wore number 1 and Bernie wore 30. So I, growing up, was always confused that, well, wait a minute, my dad wore number 1 in Philly. How come they're retiring number 1? And it was like, okay, then when Bernie came back, he took number 1.
Yeah.
Right.
And then he retired it, so no one can wear it anymore now.
Yeah, because he was 30, I think, even before the Flyers. Wasn't he 30 with the Blazers and everything, my dad, until, Yeah.
So, well, that's it.
I mean, obviously we have, with our dads being goalies and, a big heart for the position and the players. I mean, obviously the goalies are all a little unique in their fun goalie ways. Like I know my dad is for sure. But, and obviously you played with Pelly and he was like a son to my dad. And, that was a really rough road for our family personally. I can imagine what it was like for you as his teammates. When he passed, and how did you guys cope with that?
Yeah, it was for most of us the first time we had lost anyone. I mean, a lot of us still had both sets of grandparents, so we had never experienced death in any manner. And, I was with Pelly that night and I walked out of the bar with him and I went one way and he went the other way. And a short time later, I got a phone call. Rick Tocchet and Murray Craven lived fairly close to the scene of the accident. And someone that had seen the accident and knew where they lived had come back and communicated with Murray that, that there was a real bad accident. And so I got a call from those guys. And then Clarkie was out of town at the time. So it ended up being Mike Keenan and I that went to the hospital to identify the body. And it was a moment, a time that changed my life. I mean, dramatically. And as I went on to mentor younger players, to coach at the NCAA level, to be a manager in the NHL, I actually talked about it a lot. And the manner I put it in was, you're allowed to learn from other people's mistakes. You don't have to make your own mistakes. And because people say, well, when you make your own mistake, you learn in the best manner. But I learned in an incredibly harsh manner, through the accident. And I mean, and there was alcohol involved, and that's well documented. But Pelly drove like a maniac. I mean, he did. He drove like he lived. He lived life to the fullest, and that's the way he was. And I had a kind of a unique, special relationship with him. I liked goalies, but I think they liked me because I actually came back inside my own blue line once in a while, and I could win a defensive zone face-off and I could kill penalties. So I was kind of a goalie's buddy all the way along. And every goalie that I played with, I ended up being good friends with, from Pelly to Hexy to Chico Rash to all the guys. And then in Boston, it was Andy Moog and Reggie Lemelin. So I had some great guys along the way. But, but the flair. And I think one of the reasons that your dad, Kim, would have connected with him so much was the flair he played with. And think of both of your dads. The way they played was the throwback way. There was such an artistic flair to it that doesn't exist as much in today's game. When you see a goalie today with an acrobatic, ridiculous save where one leg's up in the air and the other one's wrapped around their head, they'll refer to the old-time goalies and they'll say, oh, you know, what a kick save, or, you know, well, that's the way those guys played. And I think that's why your dad, Kim, connected so well with Pelly and Pelly was an athlete. He was proficient technically, but he wasn't a big guy. And, you know, he wasn't 6'5" and he didn't block the net per se. He played, and, you know, and that's what he did. And so I think there was a unique connection there. And even for Pelly to grow up and your dad to be his favorite goalie is kind of unique. And
really
the
cool.
Town he grew up in Sweden. And, but when I think of both of your dads playing, for them, it was an art and a playground. I mean, they played the game. They didn't work the game. They both played the game and enjoyed it to the utmost. And probably in a time when you were allowed to enjoy it more off the ice than you are today. And, you know, even the teams that we had through the mid-'80s were really close. And when teams today talk about it, I know I watch. In one of the silos I work in, I broadcast games for the Montreal Canadiens. So I do 34 games, you know, in the arenas as a color analyst for Montreal. And so I see the goings on the road, and I see the entourages is too harsh a word, but the groups of people that players travel with, and, you know, whether it be parents or friends or family, and we didn't have any of that. First of all, we didn't have the resources to do it, and you know, you weren't flying people around to watch us play. And so we hung together. We came from rinks, you know, we watched. I was in Montreal one night or in Carolina with Montreal, and it was New Year's Eve, and I watched the players leave. And it had been a great game, you know, hard fought 3-2 overtime game, really entertaining game. And I watched the players leave. My broadcast partner, Brian Mudrick, and I were at the back of the rink and waiting for our ride. And we watched the players leave, and each player left individually with a group of people. And it just struck me how different that was, that they wouldn't be, you know, hanging out together after the game because they each had family and friends. And we were in Carolina. It wasn't like, you know, it wasn't like they were going to see you play in, I don't know, in Montreal or, you know, Toronto, where teams might go, Canadian families might go to watch their son play. So I think we were very fortunate. And part of the reason the bonds are what they are today is because of what we had then and the way we hung out together.
I agree. And it's the same for the wives and the kids too, because you guys were together on the road, the wives were home, wives were hanging out, the kids, you know, it's so different now. But that definitely
nobody had nannies or
no.
What I look at is back, you know, through the 90s and those earlier years was I knew every Flyer. Today, I can't name, you know, more than 5 people. You know, the names change so much. There's so much movement. Back, you know, teams had a bonded team where, you know, the Hextalls, the Poulins, Tockets, the Browns. I knew every player on pretty much every team. Now I just, you know, I can't follow because there's so much transactions, right? Yeah,
part of that is the financial challenge of the salary cap. And I made a big deal about it with Tampa Bay this year, because the lower half of their lineup, the top half is, you know, spiced with superstars, but the lower half of their lineup, a lot of the guys have been together, you know, up through the system. And I point to Alex Killorn, who was drafted in 2007 by Tampa Bay. I mean, you know, and that's 14 years. Now that's 4 years at Harvard. That's another year and a half plus in the minor leagues, but it's coming up through the system. So the structure of the team is tighter because they're together longer. And that's what was allowed back then with no cap. You know, you could develop players and keep them in the system and bring them up through the minor leagues and grow them into Flyers and grow them with the mentality. And I think that's something that's lost today because of the cap, the lower half of the lineup has to be interchangeable financially. And you lose the camaraderie of being a true team and you know, having a role within the team.
Yeah, I'm sure it makes it more difficult, even just for the GMs and the coaches too, and trying to, you know, put everything together. It's it trickles all the way down.
No question about it. No question.
Yeah.
And that part of it, I think you've seen it come out the last couple of years of Tampa Bay, and the core of that team is now, I talked about Killorn in 2007, but if you look at the structure of that team, every single year since 2007, they've added at least one or two significant players. And so, 10, 11, 12 was Vasilevsky, and 10 was Hedman, I believe, and 11 or 9 was Stamkos. And so those guys have all grown up together and been allowed to grow together.
Right.
And they have that team aspect that you can't make that up. You don't get to say, we put the same jerseys on. I had one GM recently tell me, a lot of nights were, 20 different players wearing the same jersey. And that's sad to me because that's not what it's about.
Yeah.
So you coached for 10 years in Notre Dame, right? Now, and you were such a great captain. We didn't even touch on that yet. So I'm kind of jumping all over the place. But as a captain, all right, let me go back. First of all, you were in Sweden, right? And I read that when you played there, they didn't include you. The teammates didn't include you in a lot of stuff, and you felt a little bit isolated. Did you take that knowledge and how you felt to when you were a captain for the Flyers? Did that help you?
That's a really good question, Kim. And when I got to Sweden, some things had happened. They had relegated from Division 2 to Division 1, so they had one Division 2, and then they step up Division 1, which was a big deal in a small town. And you were only allowed 2 imports at the time. And one of the imports that had led them to the championship, hadn't been invited back, not because of his on-ice play. And so all of a sudden I was the new import. And now they were Division 1, a big fancy Division 1 team in a really tiny town of 25,000 people. Yeah. And so I was seen as this new superstar before I stepped on the ice, which I was just a college player coming in. I wasn't, an established NHL player or anything. And then culturally, the Swedes it takes a while in Sweden to be accepted as an outsider. It just does, particularly in a small town. And so it wasn't until Christmas really, and the minute I stepped on the ice, I lit it up. But what that did was it kind of put me on a different pedestal again and made people less likely to invite me over to their home or to include me. Because not only, now I was seen as, holy smokes, now we're Division 1 and we're a great Division 1 team because of this guy. And, and you learned a lot culturally. And when you're sitting in a locker room and there's one other American in the locker room and he had been there for a couple of years, so he actually spoke Swedish. And so everyone's talking a different language and then everyone starts to laugh and you're like,
wow.
Okay, are they laughing at me? Are they laughing with me? Or am I included in any manner? It's just really, really tough. And so I think what happened there, maybe I grew to an inclusion part of my life that when I could play a role, Kim, where I was going to be a guy who would step ahead and include people, I was absolutely, willing to do that. And the second part of it actually came when I came to Philadelphia, because when I arrived on the doorstep, literally, I got called up on April 1st. Like, who gets called up on April Fool's Day? Like, seriously, I'm in Duffy's Pancake House. Yeah, I'm in Duffy's Pancake House in Portland, Maine, and the phone rings and Duffy answers it and he says, Keith Allen. And I'm like, yeah, sure, it's Keith Allen. and so I had never been to training camp because I had played in Sweden, come back in February, played in Portland, Maine for 16 games, and then got called up. So I didn't know one single person on the Flyers, like not one. Wow. And not only that, but I'd been in Sweden for a year, and I'd been in South Bend, Indiana for 4 years at a time when you didn't get hockey. I mean, you didn't have the national broadcast level. And so I didn't even know who's in the NHL. Like, I didn't have any clue. And so it was that, we talk about intimidating and coming in, and it was the acceptance of veteran players, and it was Bobby Clarke and Daryl Sittler in particular, who went out of their way to include me. And then Clarkey over that summer invited me to work out with him. And it was really the break of a lifetime for no reason. I mean, it wasn't, wasn't anything he had to do. It wasn't. And so I think from that point on, for me, it was about inclusion. And my second year in the league, when I was named captain, shockingly, Clarkey retired and Mike Keenan was coming in as coach. And you know, I remember clearly the day they called me into the Coliseum, you know, on a Wednesday afternoon and said, you know, we're going to make you the captain. I was like, you're looking around the room like, if you seriously? Like, I'm looking around my own locker room at some of the leaders we had in there, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But it was also a fear factor. It's like, okay, what do you want from me now? Like, I'd had this really good rookie year, but now, you know, what
and following Bobby Clark's shoes too.
Yeah, and I was really careful to say not replacing Bobby Clark, but following is the right word.
Right.
You know, who was going to replace that legend?
Right.
But his acceptance and inclusion, and Paul Holmgren was a part of that group, and Billy Barber, and the last of that group.
Better guys than that, yeah.
Yeah, and I watched the way they did include me, and so, you know, when the next wave came in, the 19-year-olds were Zezel and Derek Smith, and Rick Tocchet was 20, Murray Craven was 20, Ronnie Sutter was 20. I mean, people forget that 84, 85 team.
So young.
You have to go back and look at the ages of that group. It was ridiculous how young that team was. And, you know, we came that close and lost to the great Edmonton Oilers. But but you're right, Kim. I was aware, particularly when a guy came from another country, on how hard it had been for me going to Sweden, and how if I could make it easier in any small manner for someone to be in our locker room, I was going to do that.
That's I just think that's a great story. I never really knew that about you, and I think that just says so much about your character, because obviously you were loved as a captain on the ice, but also in the locker room, outside the locker room, just in general. So you know, they're good lessons. Like you said, you don't have to always learn them yourselves. You know, it's good lessons for the young kids out there. So I like that.
Put yourself in the shoes of the Europeans coming over who don't speak English, right? So that's a pretty interesting point.
Well, you assume that, you know, that's a natural, and that, you know, hockey is their first language and English is their second language and their native language is their third language. But it's as much about, like, seriously, it's as much about going to the grocery store and, you know, going to the dry cleaner and stopping to get gas for the first time, and, you know, all things you take for granted on a day-to-day basis.
Phone call. Well,
picture going to the picture. Okay. You know, we lived in South Jersey, as you well know, and picture pulling up to a toll booth for the first time.
Oh, geez.
Like, seriously, like, you're looking at the toll booth like, what is this? And what am I supposed to do? So
give me
all
your passport.
the little simplicities of life. Well, seriously, would you think you were going through a border check? I mean, I don't know, right?
That's funny. Pull a passport out. That was funny.
You should need a passport to go from Jersey to Philadelphia, right? Makes sense.
Well, when I went to Paris, I remember just walking through the airport, and everything was in French, and we had a car coming to pick us up. I had it was so confusing just getting through the airport, you know?
Yeah.
And I know when my dad came to the States, they didn't learn English in school then. You know, he was French speaking and came down at 17, 18, not knowing English. I think there was another guy on the team that spoke French, which was good for him. But I always wonder, like, that's such a scary thing for, you know, and your kids then, you know, going through that.
Very much so. I love your dad, though, Kim, because his French accent, I think, has gotten better and better, and I say more and more pronounced over the years, because he knows how romantic it is, and he knows how special it is.
He's not losing that. There's no way.
I think he practices it, actually.
I have to get that on video one day, secretly, him practicing his whole French accent.
That's exactly right. I'm getting too English here. Yeah, I'm getting too English here. I gotta work on some stuff.
It's funny because when he's on the phone with his relatives and stuff in Canada, he'll be talking in French, and then he'll throw out a line in English or a word where he'll forget a word. He's kind of back and forth with both languages, but yeah, that accent is still hanging on there.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So now, you were part of the big French clearing brawl in Montreal, right?
I was in '87. I was right in the middle of it. Unfortunately,
he go on, and he told us the whole, you know, story. And so, what was your perspective of it all?
Who did you get tied up with?
Hopefully, no one.
Yeah,
no one. Yeah, that would be where the whole other team was looking for me. You know what? I had 3 broken ribs. and I had spiral fractures, and so I
God.
was getting nerve blocks done right before the game in order to play. And so I was an absolute mess physically. I'd broken them in the first round and played late against the Islanders, and was just coming back into that Montreal series for Game 6. I hadn't played in the first 5. So
that wasn't good timing.
yeah, nice timing, seriously. And so I did. It was almost surreal. It got a lot of play this year because it was, the anniversary of it, and it got a lot of play and a lot of, publicity up here. And it was crazy and surreal, the whole thing. And I remember Larry Robinson and I talked about it at length this year on a podcast or a call about, how it was just an unreal situation, how it all developed, and how unusual it is. And to this day, guys, and for today's current world, the referees and linesmen still aren't on the ice for warm-up, and it makes zero sense to me. 0 cents that night didn't change. At least put the 2 linesmen out there and let them stand on the red lines and stretch out there. Like, it makes no sense to put 2 teams that dislike each other totally on the ice with no adult supervision. Like, come on.
Right.
What are you inviting?
I feel like it took them so long to get on the ice that night. Like,
yeah,
I mean, a lot went on before they came out.
But maybe that was by choice too, Kim. Maybe they were hoping it would settle down and say, maybe if we don't
not going out there.
Well, if there's no one to break it out, it'll break off itself.
If you have broken ribs, like, that's painful. Did guys on the other team in Montreal know you were injured?
Yes.
Were they maybe looking for you? Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like,
and
I'd be laying low.
I had slipped a flak jacket on. The other thing was, when I came off the ice at the end of each period, I took my skates off. I geared right down. So I was already in that manner when it started. So I had to put skates back on and throw gear back on to get to a point to get out there. And did they know? Yes, they knew. Trust me. That was survival mode at that point for me.
Well, Dougie Crossman didn't even bother putting his skates on, right? He just ran out.
Shower shoes. Why not? Shower shoes. Makes total sense to me.
It's such a Doug thing to do,
It is a Doug thing to do. If you know Doug, that's a total Doug thing.
Yes. Chico, he kind of broke down that whole thing for us, and it was funny hearing his.
Well, the fact that Chico was one of the initiators of it in itself makes the story surreal. I mean, like if you're telling the story and you start with Chico Resch, everybody's stopping the story right there and go, "Wait a second, you're starting a brawl story with Chico Resch?" And I laughed at
trying to make the peace. I felt like
I laughed at Eddie Hosper that night. Now, I had grown up with Eddie in Toronto. Eddie was actually, and I played the same Little League baseball team when we were like 10 years old. And so I'd known Eddie, for years, and there's 2 sides to him, right? There's the on-ice persona with many people, and then there's the off-ice persona, and it's, which one is which. And when I came in after that, in the old Montreal locker room, the washroom is really tiny, the shower area and the sink, and there's actually just one mirror to shave, and so I remember coming in, and I had to go, I believe it was Bob Gainey and I had to go to the referee's room at some point because we had to try and straighten out the mess that had gone on and what was going to happen, and if they weren't going to let guys play, and so I walked back in. Eddie had showered and shaved and combed his hair perfectly, so it's like a little flat, like across, looking really nice, a little bit of gel in it, and I walk in and he said, "Hey, Poulin, I just want to make sure I'm not in the lineup tonight, right?" And I looked at him and laughed. I'm like, "Well, if you were in it before that, you're not now, Ed. I don't think you did anything to earn your way into the lineup. So your hair looks great, absolutely great, and you got a really nice clean shave. So I just go and watch the game and have a nice night, Ed."
And like you said, off the ice, I used to babysit his kids. I love him and Dana, and he's going to be on the show. But what an awesome!
Well, you can ask him that question. I will. Guy, so I just remember the hair being combed just perfectly, and him looking at me in the mirror because I was behind him. Like, "Hey, Poulin, just want to make sure I'm not in the lineup tonight, right?" And I'm like, "No, I don't think so, Ed. But thanks for dropping by."
So, how many guys were not in the lineup? Was it just like the 4 that started it?
No, the other 3 did dress. So the 2 Montreal players clearly played.
Okay, so it was just them. All right.
But Eddie wasn't in the lineup to start with, because you could dress extra players for the warm up then, just in case somebody got dinged in the warm up, or And
I
so
didn't realize that. Okay.
He was an extra player that was dressed anyway.
Oh, okay.
Well,
good old Eddie.
It was funny. Yeah, it's funny listening to Chico here, because, like I said, he was, there's the backup goalie kind of near the end of his career, kind of, bond the team and keep the peace. And it's hilarious that they turn into little kids. And
St. Chico, like seriously, St. Chico started that? You could see Eddie starting it. You couldn't see Chico involved.
Exactly. I love the story when we had Chico on, how he before games you couldn't find him. He'd be off talking to the workers, learning Spanish. Like he wanted to learn Spanish. So he'd be all
Kim, one afternoon, it was a Friday afternoon, so we had played somewhere on Thursday night and flown into Toronto and skated in Toronto on Friday afternoon. And so Saturday night is the big hockey night in Canada, Flyers at Leafs. It's a real big deal. And, I'm from Toronto, so I had people to go see. And so I'm a little late getting out of the locker room, and you walked across the end of the old Maple Leaf Gardens, and the doors were open where the Zamboni came out. And I could hear what sounded like a play-by-play, and it was loud, and it was, and Resch makes a great save. And I look out, and Chico's still out in the ice in full gear, and the two Zamboni drivers are shooting on him. So he's the last one out on the ice. And, he's not playing Saturday night, so he's taking extra shots, and he decides to stay out and do play-by-play analysis for the two Zamboni drivers, who probably still talk about that story to this day.
Oh, I'm sure they do. We have to find those guys.
That's hilarious.
That's such a Chico thing to do. He just, there you go, a goalie. Just kind of, goes to his own little drama. Now, also, go ahead, Cora, sorry.
No. I was just going to say, he's just such a great guy. And that's where you see guys that last so long in the league are just great team players, great guys, and bring guys together. That's what I loved about, talking to Chico.
Yeah.
And Chico was, obviously a great starting goalie in his day, but he played a backup role for a significant portion of his career behind the great Billy Smith and, later in his career. And I work with a couple of guys now who predominantly were backup goalies in their career, Jamie McLennan and Marty Baron. Now, both were starters at various points, Marty in particular, but it's the perspective. They're the ultimate team guys, because there are many nights when they know they're not going to play, and they know they're not going to be in the lineup, and it's the role they play is so significant. And we joke about how many of them get into TV. Chico's obviously a radio analyst, guys like Darren Pang and Kevin Weeks and all the guys that you see down there, and Kelly Rudy. And it's because they sit and watch so many games.
Yeah.
And they're essentially, they're playing the game in their mind as they sit and watch, over the years, and they develop their own storylines. And one of my favorite backup goalie stories, though, and it was Bob Froese, who wasn't playing that night. Pelle Lindbergh was in net, and then notorious Mike Keenan, would pull a goalie, for getting words wrong in the national anthem. You never knew what was going to happen. And the old Quebec Coliseum was famous for a couple of things, and one of them was that there was no room on the bench for the backup goalie, so he sat on a chair on the other side of the rink. And so he's all alone sitting on a chair in the door, the entranceway on the other side of the rink. And so the game starts in Quebec, and one of the other things that Quebec is famous for will become part of this story. And so they were famous for their hot dogs, their chien chaud. They took a hot dog and pressed it, and it was just phenomenal hot dogs. It was always a big deal. So we're 6 minutes into the game, and Quebec scores like a goal that Keenan thinks is bad. So he pulls Pelle Lindbergh, and he motions to
Froese is eating a hot dog.
Yeah.
Oh, well, he motions. This gets better. No, this is better, Kim. So he motions to Froese from the far side that he's got to come over, and he's going in the game, and you can see Froese's face. Oh my God. But he has to come over to the bench to get his gloves and mask and stick. And so he's skating over, and we're sitting on the bench, and he's got mustard all down the front of
his jersey.
Totally busted. We're 6 minutes into the game, and the jersey has mustard all down the front of it.
What did Mike have to say about that?
Yeah, not very happy.
Yeah, I was going to say. It's funny that you talk about it, because Mike Hartman, when he was in Buffalo, my dad was coaching. I loved Mike Hartman. I talked to him a lot. We do a lot of stuff together. And he had great stories about Glenn Healy because he was on the fourth line and Heels was the backup. And he had, and Keenan was coaching too. So Mike would tell me some great stories about Heels and Keenan going back and forth. And they were getting on the airplane one day and Healy just signed a big contract and Keenan going up the stairs of the airplane is telling him, hey, you're not going to see any ice this weekend. You're not playing any games. And Heels like, I don't give a shit. I don't care at all. I'm making 1.2 million. So Hartman was telling me some funny stuff because he got to know the backup goalies. But
yeah, they play a special role in the game. They really do.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look at Bobby Taylor. Like I love the story how like my dad, played almost every game, and there was like a big game, and I forget how many games into the season, like a lot. At a really big game, and he started Bobby Taylor, and they asked him after the game why he started, and he's like, it was his turn, It was just
1 out of every 75.
Right. Especially back then, because the starting goalie, it's not like now where you're rotating goalies. The starting goalie played almost every game. So, and Bobby Taylor, my God, you don't get a much more team guy, good guy. Absolutely. He also went into television too. So
yeah, perfect role.
Yeah, exactly.
I think he's in Tampa. I think he's doing the color out in Tampa.
Yeah, I think he's been there a while.
He still does, really. He's been there forever.
Yeah. Now, Keenan, I'm sure you were a captain under him, so I'm sure that wasn't always easy.
Yeah, is this podcast long enough? Is this podcast long enough? I get asked a lot of questions. It was unique on a lot of fronts, and one, it was only my second year in the league. But Bobby Clarke had been my mentor, my roommate and everything, and now he was the general manager. So Keenan knew about our friendship. And so it was a unique triangle. But I really felt it was my job to absorb a lot for the team and to be able to liaison between Mike and the team. And a lot of what he did was effective, and a lot of what he did I felt was, totally unwarranted, but it was his manner of coaching. And he wanted to create controversy. Like, that's what he wanted to do. He wanted, he'd try and create controversy on this podcast right now. And I'd say, well, I think it's gone fine. I think we're all getting along fine. But he would think that maybe the podcast would be better if one of us was really mad. And he'd like, okay, that's not always the way it works.
Right.
And, but he had his method of how he motivated. And it was up to me to be able to, in my mind, to be able to read that method and to be able to communicate to the guys that here's why he's doing it. And, we've got to forget about his method of delivery and worry about how to get it done. And, we got through it. It was 4 years of constant. Like, there was no relaxing. It was always, it didn't matter what was happening. And almost the smoother it was, the more he was going to look, because he thought you were better agitated than you were comfortable.
Wow.
And it's a tough way to live. It really is. And it's and
that must have been tough on you. You're in the middle of it all. So it must have been exhausting, like mentally exhausting for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, constantly. And, it was great lessons for me. But it was when you were, if I think of one word with Mike, it was constant. There were no days off.
Well, Ron Duguay was mentioning
I was just going to bring that up.
That, even my dad laughed at that. I told him about, Mike Keenan, taking Duguay aside after the Winter Classic where Bernie played. Ron had the chance to score, very classy move, shoots it to the pad. Well, Keenan after the game says, it could have been a different outcome if he'd have just scored on Bernie.
It was an alumni game. Ron's like, Bernie's night, not my, and Ron was so classy how he handled that situation.
I remember, there's a couple of funny things about that, but I remember one of the Rangers skating by me, like at the start of the third period, and said, I got benched. I got benched in an alumni game. But so we were standing with Mark Messier. So it was Clarkie, Mess, and myself at center ice before the game. And I was mic'd. And so, we were just chatting away, and Kim, your dad skates up. And Mess says to him, now talk about classy, Mess says, hey, Bernie, where do you want us to shoot on you? Like, if we get a chance, like, where do you want us to shoot? Oh, yeah. And he says, do you want us to shoot your glove? And your dad looks down at this old piece of leather, right? That looks like an oven mitt that hasn't been worn since 1979. And he looks, he goes, "Oh, no, not the glove, not the glove." And so he says, I'm just going to stand and just try and shoot it right at me. And,
I can picture that whole scene.
oh, yeah. And so, and sure enough, and the crowd was just going crazy. And Duguay finds himself in all alone in the first couple of minutes. Your dad was only going to play like 5 or 6 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And he gets in all alone and he makes sure he shoots it right into the middle of your dad's pads. And the crowd just goes absolutely crazy. But think of the classiness of Mess to think about asking that question, before the game. And
I never knew that.
Yeah, knowing what it was about, knowing it was about, about Bernie. It wasn't about first time back in gear. And then, take it back to the practice, because we practiced at the Voorhees practice facility beforehand. And so your dad gets in the net, and he'd been playing a couple of old timers games, right, to get ready for this. But this was the first time like fairly current guys were on the ice. And so, Marshy's running things, and he said, "Okay, guys, shoot from outside here. Like, just let him feel the puck, like shoot from the blue line, whatever." Well, Jeremy Roenick comes in like the tops of the circles and blasts one right underneath the bar, right? That would have just like seriously, Jeremy, the practice facility is jammed with people, like absolutely jammed. And it's like, seriously, JR, like that's what you like. That's not what you want to do. Like
come on.
Yeah.
If you hit him, he's not getting up for a week.
I remember I went to one of the practices and he went down, and it took a couple minutes for him to get back up. Like he was like, "Oh my God, please." Like, please. But that night was so special. And like those 5 minutes, like the last time he'll ever play, and to go out like awesome. That. And I was so little when he played. So to hear all of that Bernie, Bernie, Bernie chant with those 44, 45, whatever thousand people. And I mean, I was crying, and like, it was such a special moment. And I attribute that to Messier and Duguay. And I believe I heard that Messier said in the locker room, "No one scores on Bernie."
Yeah,
and
great.
The respect there really meant a lot to my dad.
As it should be.
Yeah.
As it should be.
Yeah.
And Keenan was going for the win the whole time.
Of course. Benching guys. Well, at one point he put out, remember, he put out like Messier, Anderson, Graves. I mean, guys that had just retired. And then on defense, he had like Brian Leach and Matthew Schneider, and he put them out against Clarkey, Barber,
Joe Watson,
Leach, Jim and Joe Watson.
Yeah.
His collective age was 300, and
not against Lindros, right?
Trying to score.
That's funny.
Now, what's the story about? I won't hold you too long, but when we had Ron on, was there a time where you were told to go fight, and you got into a fight with Ron Duguay? Or
yeah, I wasn't told to, but trust me, it wasn't something I was very good at. It was that first year, I had joined, as I said, from Europe and from the college ranks. Didn't really know who was in the league, but there were a lot of college players playing at that point, and the reputation was that college players was soft. And we were losing in the third game in Madison Square Garden, and we were going to be out of the playoffs. And I'd always had this in the back of my mind, and Duguay slash mouth a face off. So I turned around and just two-handed him. And I had trained when I was in college one summer with Tiger Williams. And Tiger Williams said, "Look, I don't know you from anybody. I've never seen you play, but you're a college player. So I'm going to try and run you out of the building. So the first time you play against Philadelphia or against Boston," he would have no idea at this time that I was even going to play. He said, "Get in a fight." And he said, "Because then I'll read in the paper that against the two toughest teams in the league, you got in a fight, and I won't bug you ever again."
Oh, wow.
And he said, and so this was in the back of my mind, right? And so I thought, okay, well, we're losing this game. We're going to be out of the playoffs, and so I'm going to fight. And so my agent was Brian Burke, and, who I just met 2 weeks before up in Portland, Maine. And so Berkey, as Berkey tells the story, he's in the crowd, and he sees this start, and he's screaming, "No, no!" and he said, and then the fight started, and you actually looked like what you were doing. And he said, "Wow, this kid can actually fight." He said, and then Duguay hit you. And he literally cut me open for like 50 stitches over the eye.
Oh gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
oh yeah. And then he stopped immediately. He was like, okay, this guy has no clue what he's doing. And he stopped. And it was late in the second period, and I went in, and the great plastic surgeon, Everett Borghesani, was at the game. And I remember Everett working on me in the little room off the Rangers locker room. And I remember how mad the Flyers were at each other. And it was the end of that whole team. And they were furious that a college kid had come in here and fought. And,
Wow.
And as if it was an insult to the tough guys on the team who hadn't done their job. And just how angry they were at that. And so now, I've got 2 black eyes. My eye is closed on one side. And we're done. We're out. It's a Saturday night. And I was supposed to go back and play in Portland for the HL playoffs. Now, I've made it to the NHL. I have no interest in going back to the American Hockey League. My eye is closed. And so we're all set. We're flying out on Monday. And Monday morning, first thing, Keith Allen's office called and said, sit tight. And we're not sure what's happening. And I said, oh, okay. And I had signed that week. I had to sign an NHL contract because the first couple of games I played, I was on an amateur tryout offer.
Yeah.
And I'd had to sign in order for them to use me in the playoffs against the Rangers, but I'd signed the contract after a certain date and couldn't be sent down. So, so that was the end, and I ended the year in the NHL.
Thank God.
Yeah, I never looked back. So thanks, Ron Duguay, for letting up, because he clearly. But you know what? You never know, because I never had to get involved again. Like, Duguay was a tough guy, and the same way Tiger Williams told the story, people would be looking at the box scores and say, "Well, Poulin fought Duguay; he must be tough."
Yeah.
We're not going to mess with him.
So at least it worked. I mean, you got 50 stitches.
It did work. It did work.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, Dave, to come on.
Yeah, this has been fun, guys. It's been fun. Good luck with the project. I think it's always cool to connect with the great fans in Philadelphia, and as I said, I'm going to get a chance to get back down in August. I always see people I enjoy when I'm back in town, but it's funny how you're perceived as a hockey player, because I played in Boston, I played in Washington, and was at Notre Dame for a number of years, but I'm a Flyer. That's what you are. When you meet people, you're a Flyer. And so it's something I'm very proud of, and something I'll always be proud of.
Well, everyone loves you here in Philly, and we all claim you as our own anyway, so that works out good. But we really appreciate, you're just such a classy guy and such a good person, and we, appreciate you having you on and your input, and excited for you to get to hold that little granddaughter.
I was going to say, you're going to see your granddaughter.
Yeah.
Looking very forward to it. So good luck with everything, guys.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Dave.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
Take care.